Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Security Opportunities in the Cloud, which will review some high-level results from our cloud customer research stream. I'm Allison Crawford, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today, we'll be talking about trends that are affecting security vendors, that is, vendors who offer firewalls, malware protection, intrusion detection, and those type of products, and trends that are affecting managed security service providers, or MSSPs. But this information is also going to be useful to cloud service providers and to end-user customers who would like to get a better understanding of the dynamics going on between security vendors and cloud service providers today. Before I pass this over to Alan, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, we're recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBR channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others that we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the materials we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A or chat function. Alan and Jane will address them at the end of the presentation. Or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to either of the analysts at the end of the webinar to set up that conversation. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can also find these slides, as well as other thought leadership pieces, webinar decks and commentaries on SlideShare at www.slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. Now let me introduce Senior Analyst Alan Kranz from our Software and Cloud Practice and Senior Analyst Jane Wright from our computing team here at TBR. Alan has been covering and writing about the software market for over 7 years and is leading our research coverage in cloud. Jane has covered the data center and security market for almost 20 years. And with that, let me pass this over to Alan.
Great. Thanks, Allison, and thanks, everybody, for joining us today. As Allison said, we're excited to be here. My expertise really lies on the cloud and the software adoption, whereas Jane is bringing a wealth of deep security expertise to the conversation. So the way that we're going to structure the presentation will be to cover both how security is impacting cloud adoption, so that both security vendors and cloud vendors have a better perspective for how to both remove security as a barrier as well as enhance it as one of the benefits for private and hybrid cloud solutions, as well as bring in Jane for the latter part of the conversation to go through the types of security, how it's going to be delivered, so that it makes it really more actionable from a security provider perspective. So it should be a good interplay between those two perspectives during the call today. So before we get into that, we wanted to take a step back and orient you to how the insight from this webinar fits into our overall perspectives on cloud. So we have the highlighted portion in purple down at the bottom. And in the way that we're executing this research is we really have a deep view into the different vendor strategies through our syndicated reports and benchmarks. Within the cloud customer research tracks, we're including security as a topic of discussion and of the surveys that we're conducting during the course of the actual adoption studies. So we're focusing on private cloud adoption, hybrid cloud adoption, professional services adoption, and highlighting security as one of those undeniably important factors that plays into the overall cloud market and what customers are buying and for what reasons. So there's a topical report. It's about 15 to 20 slides that pulls together about 1,000 surveys that we did and numerous interviews over the course of the fall. So that is available. The next one of those that we're going to be doing is somewhat related in terms of the orchestration, integration, and management of cloud solutions. So that'll be publishing in January. So these are part of our cloud customer research tracks. And so a lot of the data for today's conversation pulls from that report. So go to the next slide, Allison. So to give you a little bit more perspective for what's included in that report and the objectives for that study and in the topic of conversation today. So we have security opportunities driven by cloud adoption is the name of the report, and it's really a roadmap that we're producing for how security is going to continue to be involved in a critical component for cloud adoption going forward. So we're looking at what's the role security plays, what are the things that vendors need to understand in terms of the customer behavior and all of the decision-making processes that goes on with regards to cloud. And then this is really the part where Jane will hit on later in the presentation, but from whom, how are they actually deploying these solutions, so that it's not just the types of technology or how it's going to be used for them, it's how they're going to procure that so that it's an actionable report and provides insight into that route to market and purchasing behavior. So go to the next slide, Allison. So when we look at, so we'll get into the first part of the presentation around the types of buying behavior, how it plays into overall cloud decisions, because whether you're a cloud vendor or a security vendor, having that context for the broader technology that's being deployed really, I think, is one of the most important parts of approaching this opportunity and being successful in capitalizing on it. So we've covered the cloud space for a number of years, and what we've seen is, I liken it to the T-shirt vendors that get all lined up before the big game. And a lot of it, comes down to what the final score is, who's going to win before they can go and really execute well, get the right shirts and hats printed so that they can capitalize on that market opportunity. So we've seen a similar position in our conversations with customers around cloud that, yes, they're concerned about security, but they're getting into the actual cloud solutions themselves first. And then with that experience, being much more intelligent about where to apply security, what type of security, how they want to procure it. So it's been a fairly long, and with the dynamics with cloud overall, as it started with public cloud, I think it was a longer wait for a lot of the, how those security solutions were going to fit in, because a lot of it was end-to-end. We saw a lot of test dev workloads, lower risk workloads going to cloud, didn't have the same security requirements as the more mission critical ones. And so for a lot of those public cloud workloads, it was a difficult scenario for the security vendors to come in and really deliver well around that. We've seen a big shift in the customer market, and I think it's opening up more opportunity as private and hybrid cloud adoption really starts to grow. And so this is where we're seeing that evergreen opportunity that we've seen the workloads that fit well with public cloud. We're seeing a lot that are much better fit for private cloud, and customers really moving forward with adoption in a way that has picked up tremendously over the past year. And with that, that carries a lot more of that security opportunity that can secure those mission-critical workloads, manage the complexity that's created by multiple cloud environments. So certainly increasing opportunity we see for security going forward based on the rising adoption of private and eventually hybrid cloud within the broader customer set. And so the two, we see it really as creating a mutually beneficial relationship for the cloud providers and the security providers. We've seen a lot more activity between those two camps in terms of integrating together, going to market together, and that's driven by the customer behavior for, yes, wanting to move to a private cloud, but wanting to have help in terms of getting there and having the assurance that the security requirements are going to be there as they go forward with that. So a couple things. So yes, there's the ability to overcome barriers to adoption. Certainly with private cloud, I think security is less of a barrier that we've seen, actually becoming more of a driver. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on. And then continually looking to enhance the security that's available, because for one constant throughout all the customer conversations we have is nobody's entire cloud infrastructure is set in stone at this point. They fully expect it to be an ongoing, changing dynamic, adding new resources, shifting resources, and that's only going to increase as things like cloud standards become more prevalent out in the market and really enable that back and forth where customers can have at least some level of more ability to move amongst cloud environments and mix and match that. So we think that's only going to increase. It's about the continuously improving security because nothing is set in stone at this point. Go to the next slide. So we wanted to start with the overall context for within our studies when we asked people what influence does cloud security have on your cloud adoption. Resounding 75% say it has some impact. So it's still very top of mind, changing and shaping the behavior that we see out in the market, even as the security within the offerings themselves have increased tremendously. The dynamic that takes largely remains a barrier. So if we look at 60% would like to use more cloud technologies within their organization, and the security is one of the reasons that they can't. So they want to bring in more solutions within their organization and environment, and security is a limiter. 15% say that it changes the type of use that they're able to roll out within their organization. So it doesn't necessarily limit the amount, but it does change the types of things that cloud can be used for. And certainly we've seen that go down tremendously with the advent of private cloud solutions. We've seen that really open up the number of workloads, but still you can see even with all of the different private cloud options available, it's still a workload by workload case for what cloud can be used for and what it can't, and security is one of the biggest drivers of that. So when we look at the overall barriers or areas of high concern for cloud initiatives, and we've seen this be one of the things that drives that altered behavior. So we've provided a fairly extensive list, right down through billing, cloud sprawl, SLA. And the thing that's notable is that almost the entire top grouping, you can make a case for a lot more than we've boxed in there. If you look at things like monitoring, internal controls, data sensitivity, but even if you just look at the top half, most of those relate in some way to a security concern. So just plain security, I think, is top of mind for a lot of people. It rolls up a lot of different concerns. But who owns the data? How can they get insight into it? How can they ensure that their internal controls are consistent on-premise within the cloud? Those are all of the things, the forms that security is taking, if you will, that still are top of mind for how customers can deal with them. The only other thing that I'll note is the fourth item. This is something that we see increasing going forward, particularly when you think about hybrid environments, that the integration and the combining the internal controls across clouds, so not just cloud to cloud, we think is going to move up into that top tier of concerns that, whether you call it cloud sprawl or not, the difficulty in managing those different environments, I think, is going to be, close runner-up for security as one of the top barriers for cloud and inhibitor for growth going forward. Now, when we look at, all right, so security is one of the top concerns, the follow-up question to that is, how are they going to address it? And this starts to get at the opportunity both for the cloud vendors as well as the security vendors. Jane will touch a little bit on some of the types of tools, but in terms of just the internal or the knowledge to be able to manage and use whatever tools are available properly, how are they going to address that? How are they looking for outside parties, whether they be the managed security providers, SIs, other types of security specialists to come in and to do that for them? Majority, want to build those skills internally. So I think that's another factor as we think about this waiting game for really developing and providing clarity into the overall cloud opportunity around, or security opportunity around cloud. they're looking to build those skills internally, so that's a longer-term play, but it is an opportunity to help them on that path. But just understand that a lot of the customers feel like they want to maintain that control, even though they're shifting resources for IT outside. They want to keep those skills and competencies in-house, so it's going to take a little bit longer to build those. We'll go to the next slide.
Is that the right slide, Alan?
Nope. Next one.
Is it turning over slow? Because we have the right slide up.
You have it up on your end?
Yeah, the next slide is the blue slide. Yeah, we have it. We're on slide 9.
Yep. So we've covered security as a barrier. I spoke a little bit about security actually becoming a driver for things like private cloud adoption, particularly compared with the public cloud workloads. So when we looked at some of the perceived benefits of cloud, so again, this is all-inclusive. Security is one aspect that we looked at. You can see it's middle of the road, but certainly increasing in terms of where it's fit for the benefits of private cloud, but still largely outweighed by cost benefits, improved operational efficiency. Those are still the things that are primarily driving private cloud, but I think it is notable that security and compliance risks, and this came up in a lot of our interviews, that for some customers, and I think as the security of the actual platforms is enhanced, this is more and more true, that when they look at their own environments, the cloud security and controls and compliance can actually exceed what they're able to do with their own resources. So it's not necessarily that it's a downgrade in security to go to a cloud environment. It could, in fact, for some customers, be an improvement and a net benefit for them as they look at security with that workload. So we'll go into the last slide. So to frame up kind of the overall perspective for how big this is getting and the size of the opportunity both for cloud and for security, when we went out last year for private and hybrid cloud adoption, we looked at about 2/3 overall had either adopted or plan to adopt in the next year, and we've actually seen an increase over that fairly significantly with just in 2013. So a lot more customers have adopted at least one private cloud solution, nearly 60%. And going forward into 2014, we do expect it to reach above that 3/4 of the large enterprise customers that have some type of private cloud within their environment that they're using. And again, that's that, kind of the end of that game where they start to build the experience, the expectations are more defined, the security requirements are more defined. So it's an ongoing process, but I think that's a huge step to have a majority of customers with some experience with private cloud. And it's only going to cause the security requirements around that, whether it's skill building or the actual tools themselves, to increase that as they expand that environment going forward. So with that, I will hand it over to Jane to take us through the back end of the presentation and get deeper into the types of solutions and what they're going to be, who's going to be delivering them.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to be providing more of the perspective of the security vendor or the security service provider and what the trends in cloud adoption means to your market. And I'm going to start with a rather sobering statistic that came out of one of our surveys. Now, this particular survey was representatives of 400 organizations that are currently using SaaS in a public cloud. And we asked them, what is your expectation for how your applications are going to be secured in the cloud? And 41% of them said that they expect their cloud provider to integrate and manage security for them. Now, this is why I say that's a sobering statistic. A smaller percentage expect to purchase their own or choose their own security products and then have them integrated. The 41% are counting on their cloud service provider, and they're essentially turning over some of the responsibility for their security to the cloud service provider. So this means that if you are a security provider, a security vendor, or a security service provider, and you are hoping to engage with certain customers, and if that customer is a SaaS user in a public cloud, as we show in this example, you've possibly lost the opportunity to speak to 41% of them. The opportunity to engage directly with 41%, that's the reduction you've seen in opportunity. And so right now, times are kind of tough for security providers because they're just losing the opportunity to engage more directly with customers as those customers are working through their cloud providers instead. So when I tell this to people, a lot of folks respond and say, well, that's not so bad because the security vendors and security service providers, they can just partner with the cloud providers. And that is true, but I'm here to talk about the fact that some of those partnerships just aren't that easy to accomplish. And so on slide number 12, I want to talk about the various ways that security providers can potentially engage with customers and grow sales amongst cloud-using customers in 2014 and 2015. And to have this conversation, I'm going to be using words of open clouds and closed clouds. And I just want to say up front that I recognize that no cloud platform is completely open, and no cloud platform is completely closed, and one is not better than the other. There are pros and cons to each approach. But for the purpose of our conversation, I'm going to refer to open cloud platforms as those that have a relatively large number of publicly available APIs that enable developers to get in and add value by customizing their solutions for particular cloud platforms. And so as we look at these different kinds of cloud environments, we'll first look at the ones in red on the left, which are the more proprietary cloud platforms. Now, this is where I feel that security providers have the least opportunities to grow sales. If you want to sell into a proprietary cloud platform, your greatest potential is to become the installed vendor of choice in those cloud providers' data centers. And it would be great. Everyone would love to say that they are the installed intrusion prevention provider for name your major cloud platform. But it's really hard to get that sale and to be the installed vendor of choice. And then even if you are, once you are, opportunities for someone else to displace you are few and far between. In other words, cloud providers, once they choose the security solution, they tend to stick with it because changing it just brings up all sorts of implications for what this means to the SLAs they've made with their customers. So very few opportunities here for security vendors, and that's where the tough times have been. But as we look onto slide 13, we start to see opportunity opening up once again for security providers to engage with customers in more volumes once again. Let's look at the middle of the arrow of cloud marketplaces. These are the cloud platforms that may be moderately open or moderately closed, but generally they have fairly robust marketplaces of add-on tools and services that customers can choose or have their providers choose and add on for them. So security vendors can certainly think about getting into these marketplaces and essentially placing their product or service on the shelf of the marketplace. And there are pros and cons to doing that, and clearly the advantages are if your product is on the marketplace shelf, you suddenly get exposed to a lot more customers than maybe you could get in front of before. And if they select your product and are satisfied with it, your product or service, and they're satisfied with it, maybe next time they're looking to secure at a different cloud or they're looking for on-prem security requirements, maybe they'll think of you. So there are advantages to getting on those shelves of the marketplace. But there are disadvantages also, and this is where I was saying it's just not that easy. If you do join a cloud marketplace, one concern is that, once again, you are a little bit removed from your end customer. The cloud provider still controls that business relationship, And so the security provider's opportunity to communicate with the end user customer, to get in front of them, tell their story, show their benefits, is just a little bit of a step away there. And of course, also you have to worry about reduced margins and whether the T's and C's in the marketplace are going to change rather unexpectedly. So it's a good idea to consider joining the marketplaces, but you need to remain vigilant to those pros and cons. Finally, on the right-hand side are the areas that I feel are the greatest opportunity for security vendors and security service providers to grow sales in the next 1 to 2 years. And these are the cloud platforms that are built on open, standards-based APIs. This is where the opportunity for security vendors to really get in and show their uniqueness, what differentiates themselves, their added value that they can provide to customers, or that the cloud providers can pass on to customers. And I feel that the trend is going in this direction in terms of customer expectations and customer demands. Customers are at least looking for robust marketplaces so that they can choose more security options for themselves. And even better, they're more interested in open standards-based clouds so that they can be assured that there will be the ability to add on those specialty services, security features that they may need. And the reason for this trend, there are a couple of reasons. The major one is that customers are understanding that they have a greater responsibility to take on greater responsibility for their own security. In other words, they're recognizing that they can't count on the cloud provider to guarantee their security entirely. They need to take some responsibility to implement some of their own security controls, be it encrypting or masking the data on the client side, or watching over their own compliance for the regulations that matter for them the most. Customers are accepting that they do need to take some responsibility, so they're more interested in the platforms that will enable them to do that more easily. So moving to slide 14, I want to start talking about those opportunities. I've been saying that there are greater opportunities for security providers, especially on cloud marketplaces and open cloud platforms, but that's a pretty big bucket of opportunities. And what's important is for you to look at data and research that will help you choose the best opportunities for you in 2014 and 15 to grow your sales. And that may mean the most opportunities, or it may mean the opportunities that best fit your specialization. And so here's just one example data point that you might want to consider. We asked our survey participants, and this is the public cloud SaaS users, we asked them, when you do purchase and add on additional security features, in addition to the security provided by your cloud provider, what are the add-on security products that you mostly choose? And as you can see from the slide here, most of them choose email security. Now, the takeaway that I'd like you to choose here, to think about here, is not to walk away saying, okay, the sweet spot for future security on the cloud, future security add-on purchases for the cloud will be email security. It may be in the case of public cloud SaaS users. But more importantly, I just bring this up to show that in each segment of the cloud-using population, be it private or hybrid, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, there are going to be different and unique priorities in the security features that they need the most. And so you can look at the data and make sure that you're aligning your offerings with the greatest requirements for the segment that you are targeting. To give you another example on slide 15, we asked those cloud-using organizations who have purchased add-on security tools, we asked them, are you going to run those tools yourself? And most of them said no. 2/3 said that they are going to use a third party in some manner to run those add-on tools for them. And I think you know why. If you're familiar with the hiring situation going on in IT security today, you know that hiring skilled security professionals right now is very difficult. Conversations that I have had with end-user organizations, they tell me it's very hard to find skilled people to hire, and then when they can hire them, it's hard to keep them because they're being lured away to other organizations. And so clearly, this points to an opportunity for security service providers to add value on top of the cloud service platform. But it also gives a message to security product vendors. What this tells us is that security product vendors who can demonstrate that their tools will require the least amount of manpower or effort from the end user customers on in-house staff, the more you can show that you offload their effort and reduce the requirements of their own staff, the more the customers will be interested in your solution. So another example of looking at the data to make sure that your solutions, products, or services are aligned with customers' needs in security. I'll wrap up with slide 16. We talked about how times have been tough for security vendors and security service providers who got a little bit detached or one step away from the end-user customers as those customers were looking to the cloud providers to take care of security for them. But times are changing. Customers are once again turning their interest especially to open cloud platforms, but also to marketplaces, saying and recognizing that they need to add on some of those security controls from themselves to customize security for their particular needs. This is opening up opportunities for security providers to once again engage with a greater volume of end-user customers and potentially grow sales in 2014 and 2015. Thank you.
Great. So we'd like to open up the floor to questions. So thanks to those of you who have sent questions through already. The first question we had, guys, is security really an incremental revenue opportunity for suppliers, as some argue that it is table stakes for participation in the market?
Yes, and I'll take that one. And I think that was true a couple of years ago, that some basic security tools and protocols were simply expected. But over time, as we said, customers are beginning to realize that they need to add on their own special choices in security tools. And I believe that, therefore, this is becoming a growing growing space of opportunity for security vendors to add on value and sell additional products and services.
Yeah.
Alan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit. The other thing that we've seen from the vendor side is for a lot of the cloud vendors themselves, their focus is truly on growing the platform, the actual cloud services themselves as quickly as they can. So even for those vendors that have their own security offerings and could be receiving incremental revenue from the promotion of them, they are focusing on using those offerings to drive sales of the underlying cloud platform, move past barriers for customers where that comes up, but not as much to monetize them as a standalone offering. So that's the current state. I do think that as adoption or growth kind of plateaus for some of the cloud services themselves, you certainly could see a change in strategy as those vendors look to areas of adjacent incremental growth to sustain or optimize as much as they can their own direct revenue. But at this point in time, I think based on their position in the market, there still is that opportunity for outside vendors to operate that really as a business rather than something that feeds back to the underlying cloud platform sales.
Okay. We had a clarification question come through, guys. The question is, do you have data on how those surveys are segmented, SMB, mid, enterprise customers?
Yeah, we do. So,
go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say, so they pull from a number of different studies. We do focus largely on the large enterprise customers. So a lot of the insights that you saw today came from the private hybrid cloud adoption studies that focus on that segment of customers, particularly around the private and hybrid cloud. That's where we're focusing our research, since that's the sweet spot for that market today.
Okay.
And I'll also add that, for example, the finding I showed that said 41% expect security to be integrated by their cloud provider. One interesting thing that we saw with that is that response rate really didn't vary depending on the size of the organization, either the number of employees or the amount of revenue they take in. It held pretty pretty true from small to large. But we did see some differences across different industries where, for example, organizations in construction, engineering, and manufacturing were more likely to purchase their security controls separately and add them on, and others like finance and retail were less likely to add on security products.
Okay. The next question we had, do you think there are substantially different buying behaviors for selling security to support private clouds versus public clouds?
So if you look at, so we're talking about the differences between public and private clouds?
Yes.
So the,
buying.
Could you just repeat the question?
Do you think there are substantially different buying behaviors for selling security to support private clouds versus public clouds?
Yeah, absolutely, because for, so we've hit on some of the themes during the conversation already after the call. So this integration within the platform certainly is a model where, when you think about from the customer standpoint, their level of expectation for where security is delivered is much higher for the public cloud platforms that buying it as a service, doing it based on pure usage metrics. That expectation, I think, is more prevalent there, that it's built in. We've seen with private cloud adoption, first the workloads are different. That there's more direct oversight of what security is included, what needs to be added separately, and the desire for more control and insight on the client side for those types of workloads. So I think part of it is driven by the types of workloads that align with public and private, but also some expectation in terms of how it's delivered that changes the how security is perceived and ties into the overall purchase decision on the customer standpoint.
The next question we had come through. Back at the beginning of the webinar, you showed a slide that said 41% of software as a service customers expect their security to be integrated by their cloud service provider, and 36% said they would purchase security tools themselves. Were there any differences between these two groups?
Oh, I think we already answered that question, where we talked about the fact that the answers really didn't vary, whether the organization was large or small. So if that person had any additional questions, feel free to send that through.
Okay. The next question we have in queue right now. Do your studies cover hybrid cloud? How do you think security changes when customers move to hybrid cloud versus just public or private?
Sure. So I'll take this one. And so when we looked at security or the top barriers for cloud adoption, the hybrid fits very well with that next tier of barriers that we see in terms of the integration and management, not just security, but overall operational management and integration. So for hybrid, as they get to hybrid, that's part of the definition is you have that ability to integrate and manage. The security is going to, we think, move with that, so that you need to have not only the workloads themselves secure, but also at that integration point and all of the centralized management. That's a new area where the security, the process, the user controls all transfer not only through the cloud services, but through that integration, however that's delivered. And we're tracking the differences in terms of custom versus packaged integration for hybrid clouds. But certainly I think it both simplifies in terms of the ability to manage the cloud services, but also increases new complexity for the overall security of that environment as well. So that's more of an emerging space. Similar to the public and private, as hybrid becomes more mature, the specific requirements and who's best positioned to deliver them I think will become clearer as the adoption grows going forward.
Okay. We do not have any additional questions in queue right now, so with that, I think it's time to wrap up. So I'd like to appreciate everyone who joined us today, and thank you to Jane and Alan for presenting on the webinar. A few quick things as you're leaving. There's a short survey on your way out asking how valuable was the presentation, how good were the presenters, and if there's any additional open-ended comments that you'd like to leave us. We are using your feedback quarter to quarter to improve our webinar series, so we look forward to that feedback. And we will be running additional webinars on cloud customer adoption over the next quarter, so look for those invitations throughout the next couple of weeks through the holiday season. We'll be sending those out in early January. Several of you have asked if the slides will be available. Yes, we will be sending out the slides to everyone within 24 hours of the conclusion today, so look for those sometime early tomorrow morning or late tomorrow morning, early afternoon. And if you have any additional pressing needs, feel free to reach out to myself or the analysts here to set up conversations on the research that we presented today. So with that, I'm going to sign off for everyone. I'm going to leave the chat function open for another couple of minutes in case there's any additional last-minute questions or there's additional requests to set up conversations with either Jane or Alan. And if we don't hear from you, have a great holiday season, and we'll talk to you all again in 2014. Have a great afternoon, everyone.